What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Today, we're going to have more of a chit-chatty style video about what advice I would give to my younger therapist self. I've had versions of this video that I've made in the past, but it feels like it's something I wish I heard more of. So I think even if some of it is a little bit repeated, it feels worthwhile. And it is going to be pretty chill this week since actually the week that this episode is going up, I'm going to be out of town and pretty much unavailable from being able to work. So I'm doing this episode the week prior. Well, let's just get into it. Here are some pieces of advice I would give to my younger therapist self. And I think the first one that I would share is that when it comes to our therapy work, there are just a few core concepts that matter way more than like nailing every single therapeutic approach or having like every single diagnostic criteria memorized or whatever else I was worried about. The things that really matter the most when it comes to the therapeutic relationship are unconditional positive regard, staying curious, and listening to your gut, or at least, allowing it to take up valuable space and be heard. I think if I could just have those as like my primary guiding principles, then bolstering those variables with knowledge, feedback, supervision, textbook teaching, all of that, that would have been great. I think what ended up happening instead a lot of times was I felt like I needed to know as much as is possibly knowable and beyond, have everything memorized, implement everything perfectly. And what happened for me is a lot of times because I was so caught up in getting all those things right, and the implementation and memorization of things just right, is sometimes I would forget about staying curious. I would forget about just being with my clients in that unconditional positive regard and just sharing the caring space together. And yeah, sometimes I didn't listen to my gut. I would be in situations that were honestly potentially dangerous in a lot of my training contexts. And I just kind of pushed through because I thought that's what you're supposed to do as a grown-up. And I was like 21. So I thought, well, I'm a grown-up now, so deal with it. Now looking back, I was in some really compromising situations and boundaries would have been good. Listening to your gut doesn't just apply to dangerous situations. Certainly it includes those, but it could also be listening to your gut like, hey, maybe we're doing this therapeutic intervention and we've been on this like treatment plan for a while, but now that I'm hearing this client talk about something inside of me is just kind of feeling like this isn't the thing that's the highest priority right now. There's maybe this other concern that is worth considering exploring first, right? That's also part of listening to your gut. And along the same lines, the next piece of advice I'd give to my younger therapist self is that you don't have to know all of the therapeutic techniques and strategies, certainly not by the time you graduate and not ever. Now I use more of a framework of seeing like all these therapeutic interventions, techniques as supporting the therapy work as a whole. The therapy work itself isn't just a bunch of correctly applied interventions, because if you don't have a strong supportive therapeutic relationship, even if you implemented that therapeutic technique just perfectly, it might not do anything. It's probably not going to be very effective. The next piece of advice I would tell my younger therapist self isn't even advice. It's just data. It's data I didn't have and wish I did. But that's that early career therapists are just as effective, if not more effective, than experienced therapists on average. Why didn't they teach me this in graduate school? Was that somebody's sensitive ego? I don't know. The nerdy data backs it up, okay? In your early career days, on average, you are just as effective, if not slightly more effective, than you will be when you have more experience. So own that. Like, just what you're doing is probably pretty good work. The next piece of advice that I give to my younger self as a therapist is that taking care of yourself, therapist, is literally always the most important thing. And it's not selfish. It's not denying your clients care. It's not denying your other loved ones either. It's putting your oxygen mask on first so that You have what you need to put the oxygen mask on others next. If you don't put on your oxygen mask on first, then you are very quickly going to run out of resources if you are frantically putting on everybody else's oxygen mask. All right, another piece of advice that I am kind of bracing has a little bit of a controversial edge to it is that no, you do not have to spill your emotional guts all over the place in your training years, in grad school, in every supervision or consult group. You don't always have to be revealing the deepest, most vulnerable parts of yourself in all of your training or teaching or kind of consultation type spaces. This piece of advice blatantly goes against what I was overtly taught in graduate school, which was that we needed to not only work through our deepest dynamics, problems, pains, concerns, but we needed to actively do it like in our process papers that we were turning in to our professors, who sometimes were people that I did not find to be very safe people, or our supervisors, who sometimes I found were not particularly safe people for me. And I still opted to lean in to always spilling my emotional guts, always digging deeper. And there's an issue there, I think, where if we are expected to always reveal what we're working through in this somewhat public format, it has the potential to be very damaging. Now, on the flip side, I do think in a lifelong way, we should always be working to not only take care of ourselves, but seek to better understand some of the dynamics that we have at play that we're bringing to the table as therapists. We all have them, whatever our deep-seated concerns, patterns, unhealth, all of that is, but we should seek to do so only in the spaces where we choose and where we feel safe to do so. Seek out safe spaces to do that, but just you get to consent to it when you decide and when you feel safe. And you don't have to dig up your deepest stuff in your school papers, even if that's what your professor asked you to do. Another piece of advice I would share with my younger therapist self is it is totally normal to have triggers. Everybody does somewhere. Maybe some of us have a longer list of them or it happens more often, but everyone has triggers. And I used to be of the belief that I needed to eliminate every single trigger. And now looking at that concept, it's so inhuman. And it is very human to have triggers, and it's more valuable to understand what those are. Sure, work on those for our own care and benefit, but I used to have this perception that I should be able to work with pretty much any type of client, regardless of my triggers. And I don't think that way at all anymore. If I have trigger points and I have a certain client that brings up something that pokes at those triggers, it's much better, in my opinion, for me to refer that client to somebody who can be far more present to them than I can be, because I'm getting triggered. And I can keep working on that trigger, but I don't have to keep seeing that client while I'm working on it. Like, that doesn't feel fair to me or the client. Okay, another piece of advice I'd give my younger therapist self is to take other therapists' money-related advice with a grain of salt. They are probably giving advice based on their specific individual experience, which is relevant, but may not necessarily be universal. Rather than saying, for example, I've been having trouble generating the kind of income that I'd hoped for as a therapist, folks will end up saying things that sound more like, if you're a therapist, then you can't really make a livable income. Some other examples of this type of like generalism around money that I often hear claimed by other therapists are things like, you can't really make money in private practice, you can't fill your private practice with private pay clients, or yeah, you shouldn't be a therapist if you want to make a decent amount of money. And well, if all of those things are true, then I'm screwed, because none of them are true for me. So I might be the outlier. I can accept that maybe that's not most people, but it's not fair to generalize that and say like, well, I already know because this is what happened to me. So just know that like somebody's speaking from their experience. And another item that I want to mention that I want to be like a little sensitive as I say it, because I don't want to make a generalization that's not true, is I've come to realize now that I've been out of graduate school for a long time that like who your professors are and the supervisors and people who are involved in your training years may not necessarily represent the average therapist's experience. Again, there are going to be exceptions to that, but like on average, like the people who are your professors, they may not represent the average therapist's experience because it's a specific, like self-selected group of people who become professors. Another piece of advice that I would give my younger self as a therapist is that yes, you are probably becoming a therapist, at least in part because of some unworked through deep-seated childhood dynamics. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay. It's okay if you don't understand all of it yet. You can still hold yourself to a standard of always prioritizing your client care, making sure you also put your oxygen mask on first and all of that. And you can learn and grow as a person in your understanding of these kind of deep-seated dynamics of like what caused you to be a therapist over time. Another piece of advice I'd give is just because somebody is a boss, a supervisor, a professor, a superior in any form, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're offering great therapy. I don't even want to like unpack this fully right now, but if I had just understood that, just because somebody is in a position of authority over me, it doesn't necessarily mean that they always know better. That would have saved me like a lot of energy and just a lot. Now looking back, like some of those professors were like really awful. Not all of them, but yeah, I would always be like doubling down on the ones that they weren't awful because I wasn't good enough. They were just like that with everyone. Just because somebody is a superior in some form doesn't necessarily mean that they offer great therapy. It doesn't necessarily mean that they know what's best for you either. And my last piece of advice, at least for this episode, is that you don't have to like all your clients. It's normal and human to not like somebody. So it's more helpful to notice it again with curiosity, still positive regard and listening to your gut and curiosity that we talked about at the beginning, but to say, oh, that's really interesting. I'm having this response to my client. I wonder what that's about. And not like, oh, Marie, you don't like your client. What's wrong with you? It's, oh, there's something going on here that when you put the two of us together, I'm having this response where I'm not liking this person or I'm not liking our interactions. And that could tell me something about me or my client or our therapeutic interaction together. But all of the above are fine. If there's nothing like wrong as a therapist if you don't like your client. Of course, what you do with that is far more important. And obviously, you still need to take care of your client well, even if you don't like them. Well, I hope this episode felt supportive to you, even if you're, not a younger therapist or earlier in your career. I hope you just found it supportive and validating. I wish we talked about more of these things, and I am aware that I can be quite sensitive and lean anxious. So I'm hoping that some of these things are like Marie things that I've needed to learn as I've gone. But I have a feeling that there might be others as well who've shared some similar experiences and might be helped by hearing some of this advice. So if that's you, sending all the heart emojis your way. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. TherapyNotes helps with all of your practice management needs, from scheduling to notes to billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform included for free for all users and a whole suite of AI features to streamline your documentation process. If you'd like to check out Therapy Notes, you can get 2 months to try all of these features for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Let me know in the comments what items you would add as far as advice you'd give to your younger therapist self, because I know I didn't cover all of it. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well. I don't know how to make, do you know, like how do my kids do it? Gen Alpha does this or Gen C, Gen I don't know how to make a heart emoji.